Okay. Good evening, and thank you for joining Minority Veterans of America as we discuss the impacts and myths around the Bootstraps mentality. Tonight's conversation will include the definition of the Bootstraps mentality and how it affects our communities. You'll have an opportunity to meet our esteemed panelists and discuss how minority veteran leaders have overcome the Bootstraps mentality and myth and get to where they are today. And of course, sharing of resources and insights into using mentorship and networking to overcome the challenges minority veterans face in the workplace. My name is Melissa Margain. I am the Seattle Program Director for Minority Veterans of America, and I will serve as your moderator for this evening's discussion. I'd like to start by introducing our first panelist. Mr. Eric Ballentine is a lead housing case manager and vehicle outreach navigator at the Sophia Way, an organization providing women with shelter, social services, and permanent housing with supportive services in King County, Washington. And he is a U.S. Army veteran. Our next panelist, Jennifer Esparza, is a law fellow at Veterans Education Success. She's a Tillman Scholar and graduate of Georgetown Law School, who spent her undergrad supporting other student veterans, and she served in the United States Marine Corps. Welcome, Jennifer. And Stephanie Merlot, who is Minority Veterans of America's Richmond chapter leader. She runs Virginia Pride, based out of Richmond, and works full-time as a specialist at Major Clarity, which helps ensure each student's education leads to a successful career outcome. And she is a United States Army veteran. So welcome to all of my panelists. So let's start the discussion. So what is the Bootstraps mentality? The idea around bootstrapping or building yourself up from the ground with nothing but the money in your pocket and a little luck tends to be a harmful myth, right? That kind of imparts this personal ownership for circumstances and economic outcomes. For many that come from minority communities, this myth can be destructive and harmful, especially when generational wealth, stable and equitable wages and careers have historically been out of reach. So let's start with you, Stephanie. When was the first time you heard the phrase, pick yourself up by your bootstraps? And how did it sit with you? What have your thoughts become now, as you've continued to grow personally and professionally?
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, the first time that I heard that was just growing up. From my mom whose father was a Marine, actually. But he came from a very poor background. They kind of struggled as my mom struggled as she was growing up as well. And then, even as a child, we still struggled. We didn't have normal means. We didn't have running water. We'd have to go to the fire station to get fresh water, and things of that sort. And she would always say that we have to pull ourselves by the bootstraps. This is only temporary, but we got to do this. We have to do better. And it was something that I just kind of was always surrounded by. And even with that, knowing, like, you start learning at a younger age of, like, don't call out sick. You have to like, you have to keep working no matter what. Even if you have a broken leg, you need to go in. Don't take any vacation time. What is mental health? That doesn't matter. I'm not depressed. I'm just tired, but I have to keep going. So I kind of learned at an early age what that was, but also how it would later impact my mom and of course me.
Great, Eric. Now I'll move to you. So similar question. Your initial thoughts around that mentality of just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Always having to bite the bullet, right? Do now, complain later. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll just be honest and try to speak it as eloquently as possible. And I'm just gonna say it's bullshit, right? I heard that early on as a kid, and I grew up poor, so like pulling yourself by your bootstraps is something that you've heard all the time, whether it's from public educators, people that are supposed to be significant in your life, and it's just something that I've heard over and over again. I don't think I really realized how much of a myth and how much BS was involved in that statement until I was much older. to realize that, like, yeah, like that's really damaging, along with the, like, there's starving kids in China. Like, I grew up in the 80s. That was something I heard of, when the fact is like we have starving kids like a block from where I live, right? So it's really about, to me, is all it was. When I became more aware of like what it was about, like I realized like how damaging it is. And for whoever came up with it, I will have to say, like, it was a deviant tactic, because we even tell as poor people, we tell other poor people to say, hey, pull yourself out of bootstraps. Like, we're now promoting this ridiculous myth, in groups that we're all struggling in this together, when we know the issue is like an external factor of those who created it. So it's very troubling to me. I'm really glad to be here and be able to talk about this today, because I don't think it's talked about enough. So thank you.
Perfect. And Jennifer, I saw you kind of nodding and agreeing, with Eric's notion about, how people of the same or different socioeconomic statuses kind of hold this, this standard of success over each other's heads. So talk to me a little bit about your experience with the notion and the idea of the bootstraps mentality.
I have so many thoughts about this, but Eric really nailed it in talking about how we impress this idea that you just need to work hard on our own cultures and communities. I grew up in a Hispanic family. My parents are Mexican, grandparents Mexican, and my grandparents came here from Mexico. And so even though they had their own ways of getting here, it's been on them to just assimilate, and you need to work hard so that you fit in. You don't want to be associated with the poor Mexicans or the neighbors that, don't work as hard. We don't want to be seen that way. But what stands out for me when I look back and think about how much even my parents, pushed on us, you just need to work hard. That's how you become successful. Nobody ever talked about what that meant or how to do it, or just how to navigate the working hard process, because there's so many things that come with working hard that I don't know how to deal with: the stress, the money, where this goes, where that goes. And no one, although we try to tell each other it's just a matter of working hard, no one's really willing to sit down and work with you to figure out what's hard for you, what's working, what does that look like for you, and how can we get you support so that you are feeling like you are doing your best without feeling like you need to compare yourself to someone else's hard.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'd like to remind those watching, those that are joining us in this discussion this evening, we will be taking live questions. If you have thoughts and ideas around this conversation, just go ahead and raise your hand, throw a quick question in the chat. And as we navigate this conversation, we'll be able to address some of those questions and concerns that our viewers may have. So let me just give a little context, a little history. So back in the 1800s, the expression pull oneself up by the bootstrap meant the opposite, right, of what it does now. And it is definitely kind of, transformed, and it's ever changing. Then it was used mockingly to describe an impossible act. In 1834, there was a publication that kind of ridiculed a claim to have built this perpetual motion machine, right, by saying that the inventor might heave himself over the river, right, by the straps of his boots. There was a couple of citations in the 1840s that something is as gross an absurdity as he who attempts to raise himself over a fence by the straps of his boots. So there's been, again, it's kind of changed the meaning, who it applies to. Eric mentioned that kind of in his experience with it. So let me ask this question. How has the bootstraps mentality impacted you? Positively or otherwise? And so we'll start with Eric. What has been your personal experience with that mentality, with that kind of, standardized measure of success?
It hasn't been good. I mean, I come from a sense of, I think one of the things Jennifer said really well was she talked about like her being Mexican and like having like families like come up through the system and like work themselves hard, and it's tough because like, yeah, I'm sure like there's some success story there, right? Like of like them facing adversity and like getting to where they are now. And now like Jennifer's like graduated law school and going to Georgetown. So sure, like there's some positives out there. But at the same time, like there are other people that are using it and saying, hey, well, Jennifer did it, so why don't you like pull yourself up by the bootstraps? Or better yet, you'll hear like, well, the Mexicans do it and they work hard and do this all the time. And they will pit that against another minority. So in that sense, it has always been damaging, and it really creates a sense of a less self-worth, right? Like even in the sense of, yeah, you're black, you're a minority, but like on top of that, like dealing with all the other minorities, like you start to think that you're less of yourself too, because they're always talking about the context of these other minorities who they label as like models, right? Like they're doing these things, but you're not, right? And it's different for them too. Like they have their own experience, but what it really does is like it causes this bigger division to where you feel so isolated, that it's like deeply, deeply unhealthy and like affecting your life in a negative way. So I've never had a positive experience. I've seen like growth and like people facing adversity, but I think we tend to focus on that. But the fact is that it never should have been that hard for you to begin with, right? Like we as a community, like I instantly think when you say bootstraps, I think of the American dream, which is again another bullshit term, right? And so it's like work hard, knowing that there's a good amount of people out there who did not have to work that hard and be that stressful just to meet their basic needs. So yeah.
Right. Perfect. And that's actually a really great segue into kind of my next question. So, like Eric stated, few myths are as damaging, right, to lives as the belief that working hard, will simply lift one out of poverty, right? That attitude kind of stems from the just world hypothesis, which holds that the world is basically right and good people are rewarded. So therefore, people who have had bad things happen to them have done something to cause or deserve it. And so Stephanie, what do you say to those that hold on to the notion that people who live in poverty should just simply work harder because they have choices that they can make, which will solve their problems?
I feel like whenever I hear that, it just makes me want to scream a bunch of cuss words, honestly, because it to me doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, here I am in this bracket that I am put in, but what is it that nothing is in reach so I can even better myself. So yeah, I can work hard. I can try to get promotions. I can try to get this new job, but what am I lacking? I have every single one of these I'm qualified beyond all means, but I don't have a bachelor's degree. And it's because like either I wasn't able to do it, maybe I can't, my own thing, I can't pass math, it's just terrible. But the fact of it is like in some instances there are groups, unfortunately, that won't ever have that resource available, and it could be because maybe their parents didn't even look into going to college. Maybe their parents are just farmers and they don't know anything else because of within the region that they are in. They don't know what else is out there as far as maybe I want to be an oceanographer, but I don't know how to get to that because there's nobody here with me to tell me how to do that. And so it's kind of like we're stuck in this little circle that is not really allowing us to even branch out and go further. So I kind of lost where the question was because I got really like.
That's okay. That's what we're here for. We gotta, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, but yeah, just to kind of reiterate what I said before, it's just like sometimes you just don't see those resources in front of you that could also help you elevate and better yourself. But also those who are around you might not even know that those resources are there and feel it's normalized, and within some cultures to go through that struggle and build yourself up.
Okay, sure. So Jennifer, same question. Your thoughts around those that just say, work hard and you'll be able to lift yourself out of poverty?
So my organization, the nonprofit that I'm working with right now, Veterans Education Success, has some research that they just recently finished, and it hasn't been published just yet, but a few things were really key in this research. It focused on minority veterans and their use of education and GI Bill. And to your question, you can't, it's impossible to just expect people to work hard and work themselves out of poverty when we live in a society that just creates a cycle that keeps people within poverty. It keeps marginalized communities within poverty. This research that I had just mentioned discovered that the use of GI Bill benefits by undergraduate veterans of color was lower than that of their white peers across all institutional sectors for each year of enrollment. In addition to that, although about 40% of veteran and non-veteran undergraduates were enrolled in community colleges, those of color were more likely than their white peers to enroll in for-profit institutions. And this is a big example of, the for-profit industry really targets marginalized communities and causes them to go into greater debt. And so even talking about, you just need to go to school and get a degree, for-profit colleges generally tend to target their advertisement towards our communities and cause them to take out more loans and puts them in a deeper hole that just becomes impossible to crawl out of. So I think that people that are saying that you just need to work hard and pull yourself out of poverty aren't seeing that this isn't an individual's problem. It's a societal issue that we have with our systems too.
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Because Jennifer's busting out facts and it's got me fired up, right? So here's a term that we hear all the time in the military that is exactly what Bootstraps is. Suck it up, right? You're given shitty circumstances, you're given shitty leadership, but somehow you're supposed to make it work so that you can climb the ranks. It doesn't matter what trauma you've experienced. It doesn't matter what things you have access to. It is all put on you, even though you're put into a system that was designed for you to fail, right? We'll tell you, yeah, you can serve in the military and you can be gay, but you just can't talk about it. We don't want to agree with your lifestyle, right? Those are the types of language. And keep in mind though, just as any institution of oppression, it continually evolves, it continually has phrases, but the original intention of what it was designed to do never changes, and that's to keep you down and cause division.
That's a really good point because, it's upward mobility has always resonated deeply in the United States, right? We've always been fashioned as the land of opportunities and so on and so forth. And so, we have some comments in the chat box that are really appreciative of the discussion that we're having, right? And how it affects so many different areas in life. So let me ask this, and this is for all of the panelists. How has, if you believe so, how has the Bootstraps mentality become a standardized measure of success? And how can that in and of itself be damaging to communities of color or just as a whole? So I'll give you guys a second to kind of process that. But has it become a standardized measure of success?
Yeah, it's easy. You don't got to do nothing, right? 400 years of oppression, we built all these systems to keep the most advantageous people in power. It's easy. Of course it's going to be standardized. It's easy to sit there and do nothing and tell somebody to suck it up instead of actually getting involved, right? And figuring out what the issue is and addressing it appropriately, right? Being proactive in the issue requires listening, right? America as a whole is not great at listening. We still been arguing about the same thing for hundreds of years, right? We're still having trouble listening to women and listening to their stories and hearing them out. We're still having trouble listening to the LGBT community and their struggles, right? Because the people that are opposing it are coming from a sense of privilege to where the greatest privilege that they have is not having to listen and understand what the issue is, right? So of course, the way that it is now is the status quo. So yeah, that's why it's easy, it's access, it's privilege. You don't want that taken away.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100% with what Eric just said. Because I have experienced that work where it's always there. I'm always being told that I need to embrace the suck, which kind of also goes along with, you know, something I would hear in the military, but to always hear it in the workplace is even a little bit more, you know, demeaning in a sense to me, because it's like, we know that we're giving you something that you're not going to be able to really do. But if you want to continue to do this, then you need to embrace the suck if you want to get here. And that's really today, you know what I mean? And it's back to the point of hearing some of these things from people who come from privileged backgrounds is definitely where I hear that come from a lot, which is always kind of funny to me too, because I'm like, you didn't even really, your dad gave you this money to do this, you know, so who are you to tell me to embrace the suck? So I definitely see it very, very prevalent in today's workspaces as well still.
I think we also see it in the military. I've been out for a little while now, so, but I imagine nothing has changed. But I recall feeling this mentality of, you know, just grab yourself by the bootstraps, pull yourself up. It turns people off. One, because I don't think you understand what my life is and how I got here, number one. Number two, it just makes me want to not come to you for help, because you're telling me I should be able to figure this out and just get it done. And so now I've cut off the ability to talk to you and figure out what I need to do to get to the next step. I particularly saw this with college. In the military, you know, they press on you that if you're not taking advantage of TA, then you're wasting your time here. You should be using your benefits to the max. You're stupid if you don't. And for me, it turned me off to talk to anybody about college, because I just wasn't ready. That can be a real thing for people. You're just not ready. You've got something else going on at home. And telling us that, you know, you need to do this or you need to do that, otherwise you're X, Y, and Z, is really harmful, because instead you're telling someone that I don't have any way of supporting you, but I think that if you don't do this, I'm going to think less of you. And so I think we even see it in the military, in the way we push people to do things that we think are the next step to success.
Great. So I'm going to pose a question to our viewers here in the Zoom meeting. Just go ahead and drop it in the chat. What is some language around this whole idea of just being able to make something out of nothing? Some of the language you heard while you were serving, or just some of the language you've heard just in the workplace or with family and friends. So go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'm curious to see, you know, what a lot of us have experienced and how we can kind of navigate that conversation. What I'd like to do now for the panelists is to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to start with Eric. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You know, very briefly, just, you know, your background, where you came from, your time in service, and kind of how you've transitioned and used, you know, some of that success to land where you are now.
Yeah. So I was in the Army from 2000 to 2005. So I joined prior to 9/11. Had the experience of 9/11 and like what that whole shift. The Army was also going through a weird phase of like be all you can be to Army of one. So the philosophy even then kind of changed. I think one of the things, going back to one of your first questions, is like how the bootstraps mentality affected you. I would tell you that like my work ethic is like pretty unquestionable. Working through some trauma and like working in therapy, I realized that actually that stems from bootstraps. So to be fully honest, like I have a strong work ethic. I'm not gonna let that go because it's one of my traits now. But that is something that I've dealt with. But I think it was particularly really difficult in the Army because when you don't have receptive leadership and they're just telling you to suck it up and not give you proper direction, it's depressing, right? And I like literally depressing. I got out of the military. I struggled in my transition, not really figuring out what it was that I wanted to do in my life. What really changed was like me getting back involved in the community. So like I worked with like organizations like the Mission Continues, which like kind of reignited my passion, figuring out that really what I love to do is like service amongst anything else. So then I went back to school. I got my degree in urban studies, focusing on community development. So we talk about like things like bootstraps and like upward mobility and systemic issues, while also like trying to build better cities, right? With all these social issues built into that context. I got involved with MBA. Like I met Lindsay one day, and I was like, man, I was like, this girl is hella cool. I was like, let me calm down and go talk to her. Nervous as hell. And like we're like some of the best friends that we ever had, and like we have had like real conversations, and like we are like now I have the ability to get out there and talk about like real shit and like have no regrets, no remorse, because I know that I have a solid community that is willing to stand behind me and say the same shit and amplify my voice. And I'm willing to do it for them as well, right? I love that. I have no regrets because even the trauma associated, that the trauma that I had to deal with, it still brought me here. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm in a place to where I'm able to process that because I have a supportive community.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. Jennifer, if you can just, kind of tell us a little bit about you and your journey and what type of resources and support you utilized to get to where you are.
So I have to throw it back just a little bit in my history, but it's more my mom's history. My mom was a teen mom to my brother. And so there's a huge age gap between my brother and I. They grew up in East LA and then moved out to the suburbs. And my brother had a really strong network of support and ended up going to Stanford. And so super proud of him. But when it was time for me to go to college, 9/11 had just happened, my senior year of high school. I felt a lot of pressure from my dad, particularly, that if my brother can do it, why can't I do it? While ignoring all the things that happened in my life that made my upbringing so much more different than my brother's. And so I pushed back. I was tired of being in that shadow and being compared and told that I should be able to do the same thing, and ended up joining the Marine Corps. I served for 11 years before deciding to get out. I was struggling with mental health issues and beginning to have panic attacks without knowing what they were. And a lot of it really just stemmed from military sexual trauma, which also didn't know what that was until I was able to step away from the military and talk about it with someone. But having my brother, I used him as a big supporter in everything that I've done after the military. So when I got out, I thankfully was able to move in with him and lived with him while I went to the University of Oregon and got my bachelor's degree. I studied things that were interesting to me without a focus on what do I want to do. It's one of the best pieces of advice that he offered, is just focus on what interests you and you'll do well, and then we can go from there. And in that moment of being able to immerse myself in material that made me excited to learn, I realized that I was doing really well in school, and I could maybe try for that one dream that I had when I was a little kid and knew I couldn't do right after high school, is apply to law school. So I used the GI Bill through undergrad and then used VRNE for law school. And in this time period, I did try to find connections, veteran communities that were like-minded and would provide support, or were where there were a lot of women, where I felt I could talk to and not just heavily dominated by men. I had a really bad experience at the University of Oregon with our veteran community when I had first went to that campus. And so I was really grateful that there were other things out there. I used peer advisors for veteran education. We had started a team, RWB, in Eugene, Oregon, and coming out here to DC, where I'm at now, I applied to the Pat Tillman Foundation, and it just opened up so many doors. And since then, I've also met Lindsay, and I think everyone falls in love with Lindsay. But I've also met Stephanie and a lot of great people once you find a community that works for you. It's great because everyone wants to introduce you to someone else that they think is, like-minded and will help you. So now I'm working at Veterans Education Success, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on providing support to veterans in their pursuit of higher education. So whether they're having issues with for-profit schools or even community colleges, state schools, we're here to try to help and navigate that. For me, it's been all about networking, and yeah, I want to give back to the community in any way that I can.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's really important, like you said, to have that community, right? To feel safe, to be able to share and have, relatable experiences. And so, as we get to know our panelists, please, follow their social media, look into the organizations that they represent or that they lead, so that you too know that the resource is available. Pass it along to someone else who may be able to utilize it. And so I really, really thank you for that. So Stephanie, talk a little bit about your journey and what it looked like for you.
So, my journey, of course, I'm from Texas. I grew up pretty much in a prairie, if you will. It was just, well, we came from no money. And when my mom decided that we deserved better, we moved to another town somewhere in Texas. And then she was just like, no, we still need to do better. And then she moved us to Virginia because she felt like we'd have better opportunities here. And then she was like, no, we can do better. And she started to work more jobs and everything. And, all of that was kind of leading up to me getting a job and helping out around the house and doing what she was doing, right? Which was being an administrator. And I was like, no. And just like Jennifer, 9/11 had just recently happened. So I think that happened when I was a junior in high school. And so I went ahead and I was like, no, I'm not going to sit here and be an administrator anywhere. I'm going to go into the military because I feel that that's going to help me get to a road to success, because that's what I was told. And I believe it. And so that is what I did. I was in the Army for about 4 years, got out in 2007, re-enlisted to stay in. However, I was injured really bad by picking up a starter engine for a 5-ton truck. So that's about 80 pounds. And at the time I weighed like $110. So I had no business picking that up, but I wanted to prove myself. So I did it. And, but yeah, I hurt myself. And then a week and a half later, I was in a really bad accident on the Autobahn, which really kind of put me in a still bad physical state today. When I got out, I jumped jobs a lot. I didn't know what to do because I wasn't there was no transition program. I was just kind of told like, good luck, and went to stay with my mom, who lived in a really bad trailer. And then I was like, well, screw it, I'm going to buy the trailer next to you. And that's what I did. I lived there for about 6 years, still trying to figure out my life. My plan to become like, get out of this trailer, get my mom out of this trailer and pay off my car. So I decided to use my GI Bill and try to go to college. Well, while doing that, I actually picked up 3 additional jobs. I worked for Homeland Security at TSA. I worked at a museum for 2 museums. I worked at a Civil War museum, and I worked at the Quartermaster History Museum giving tours. So all while still going to school full time, just so I can try to make it. And I was in there longer than I wanted to because, again, I just couldn't pass math. I tried multiple different ways and I just couldn't do it. I was getting my degree in teaching and I did like 90 hours of student teaching. This child came up to me with hand sanitizer in his eye on purpose. And I said, this is not for me. I am not going to do this. I can't be a teacher. Let me try something else. But through all of that, still not being where I wanted to be. Now fast forward to where I'm at now, I do work for an education tech company that does provide a way for students to see something else outside of what they normally look at, which again kind of goes back a little bit to bootstrapping in a sense, where if you live in a rural area and you know that your dad only works at the local plant, and maybe your mom's an administrator like my mom was, well, guess what, there's other things out there. If you're really interested in becoming anything that's outside of your town, here's some resources that can help you get there. This is what you need. But yeah, that kind of led me with everything that was going on between me and the military, because I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I wasn't really out. I wasn't out. I couldn't be myself. I became very depressed. I became very, reclusive to everything. And I was later picked to join Virginia Pride, which we are known for our Pride Fest here in Richmond, but we also do scholarships and we do events and sponsorships as well. And then through that's where I met Lindsay. She just sneaks into all of our lives, doesn't she? Let's just but yeah, Lindsay and I met because Lindsay was a vendor at Pride Fest, and I reached out to them and I said, I really would like to hear more about your veteran space, because I need that. And I was looking for a sense of belonging, because we didn't really have much of anything here in Richmond. And from there, Lindsay recruited me to be a part of, some veteran. We had something at Diversity for Veterans Day and whatnot. And then it just kind of bloomed from there, and here I am with you fine folks. And continuing, I really hope to continue that. We reach out to more and more people, by doing things like this. I think this is really amazing.
What's most interesting about the conversation that we're having is all of the panelists just seem to segue into the next part of the conversation naturally. And so you made a really, really valid point, Stephanie, about the fact that our childhood neighborhoods is one of the strongest predictors of long-term economic success.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are different choices that you make as an adult, and different pathways that you can take, but we don't typically have much say, right? And kind of where we grow up and what we do. And if my memory serves me correct, there was a paper out of Harvard that stated that every year that a child lives in an economically disadvantaged area, the harder it becomes for them, right? Or after 3 generations of poverty, that family typically doesn't even have the wherewithal to move themselves out, right? To kind of create opportunity or have access to it. And so sit with that for a second. That's really important, one, to know, and then also to just, there's just so much pressure in that, right? Having to overcome that, having to do something different, and not even having the resources. And so my question to all of the panelists is, how important to you is the role of mentorship, right? How important is the role of, just having someone that looks like you, that is interested in the same things, to impact your life, to kind of help you grow and become successful. So how important is that? And we'll go with Stephanie. Why not?
Yeah, no, would you repeat that question real quick? Because I was reading some of what was going on in the chat.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The chat it's a good place to pop into. Yeah, absolutely. So how important is the role of networking, right? Mentorship and just having representation growing up? If you think about your childhood or in your earlier years, how important would that have been for you? Do you think it would have been different in the choices that you've made?
Yeah, it would have been a tremendous, it would have just helped so much, because hell, I'm from Texas, and where I lived in Texas, there was no representation of me. Okay, let me tell you, I came from a town with 1 stoplight and it blinked. And I saw no one that looked like me. I was the only biracial person that I knew. And I was confused by that. I did not understand. So representation is definitely important. And it's also, you had mentioned something about if you are in a certain location, going back to what I stated earlier, How often do you actually speak to people and they tell you where they're from and you go, ugh, you know what I mean? And it's also like, we're kind of feeding into that at the same time. Like, oh, dang, you made it here? Look at you. And, that's something that we have to be more aware that we do as well, because, yeah, they did make it, but also like, but yeah, that's mentorship is really, really important, as well as networking, because if you don't network, then you won't know some of the resources and ways to kind of help elevate yourself as well. And because sometimes we'll get in a rut, you know what I mean? But we need somebody to help show us like, no, you're special, you're good, you can do this as well.
Absolutely. Eric, same question. How important is mentorship, networking, representation? And do you feel like that may have influenced some of the decisions that you've made or that you had been a part of growing up and even in your adult professional career?
Yeah, representation matters, right? Like that's something we hear a lot now. I didn't hear it back then. So I would say, I think what really got me where I am now is like actually finding my community and finding supportive people that I could believe in and like truly confide in and be like the truest form of myself, right? And so that is what really got me going. Like everything else was just dragging ass. It really prepared, like the biggest moves in my life have been in the past 5 years, right? I'm 39 years old. So to put that into context versus I was already out of the military, like I've been out of the military for 20 years now. So it's like I had all this, there was very minimal movement after I got out of the military. And then I really, really found my purpose in life. I really felt strong in that purpose and supported by my network of peers. And that all came after that. And some of it was a product of like furthering along in that journey. Representation matters from a sense of it's important to have people around that look like you, that think like you, that have the shared experiences. Because what happens is that when we don't have that, we go back to that isolation and truly believe that we're in this journey alone. And I think the thing I love the most is like that's what MVA is like providing that visibility. Because I guarantee you, these 2,000 plus members, at one point in time, they thought that they were alone. Like they thought that they were just treated like crap, and they deserved it because they were the only person that was like that. And obviously, it's not, right. So that's why it's so important. And then continuing on, right, like getting to a place and having a supportive network. Now it's time for you to like go out and seek others and do that for people who think that they're alone and bring them into the fold. Like, hey, come to this party. Like there's all these cool people that do all this great shit, and like guess what, like we can be ourselves and celebrate that moment.
Nice. And we'll round out the question with Jennifer. How important is networking and community building?
I would not be where I'm at without the community that I've had since leaving the military. I realized at one point of privilege that I feel is having my brother, even though I can't even imagine what it was like for him and my mom. Their age gap is the same as my age gap with him. That's what blows my mind, and something I just realized a couple weeks ago. But I do realize that having him has been a privilege that other people in similar situations don't have. I did have a brother that was far older than I am, a decade older, and did go to college and was able to mentor me into what that can look like when I was ready. Another part of that, though, that mentorship relationship that I have with him is that I think he really realized that he couldn't push me to do something that I wasn't ready to do. And so instead, I appreciated, so whether you're the mentor or not, I appreciated that he was there when I was ready. And so while I was going through the military and whatever else I had going on in my life and thinking that this didn't matter, my brother was there, and the support he could provide was guiding me through my education. And when I was ready, he would be right there. And so realizing not everyone's going to be there on a mentor's time, but on their own. And so having someone that could wait was really helpful. Beyond that, finding a community that I could trust and that had values that I lived by. I honestly don't know that I don't know that I would have made it to Georgetown without that community. I don't know that I would be sitting here now without that community. I was really struggling with mental health issues when I got out of the military and trying to do the education thing and the transition and VA all at the same time. I really needed a support system that would understand what I was going through, and a system and community that cared about education and my own success the way I did. And for me, the veteran group that I initially found was not it. It was harmful and damaging. And so recognizing that there are sometimes groups that we may think that we can affiliate with that are just not the right ones, and finding somebody who's willing to say, you know what, I'll walk away from it with you until you're ready to come back, or never. But yeah, I don't think that many people can do it alone. And that's where this goes back to that bootstrap mentality too, that no one can really do it alone. And anyone who says that they can, they're lying, because someone has helped you along the way. And instead you're just ignoring that support that you received from someone.
Okay, thank you all for your responses. So let's kind of shift the conversation slightly and talk about how this mentality affects socioeconomic status, right? Financial health, so financial literacy, access to financial literacy, and really understanding that. So from your own personal experiences or personal perspectives, how do you think this notion of like pulling yourself up and making something out of nothing with nothing, right? Financially, a lot of people compare, the hard work of a CEO who puts in 80 hours a week to, someone who is on the lower income scale, right? Who has to work several jobs, right? In order to make ends meet. So just what are your thoughts, just kind of casually, on financial health and like the effects of socioeconomic status when it comes to that mentality? And so if anyone wants to jump in first, you can.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like I somebody, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Stephanie. She talked about like she had like 2 or 3 jobs, right? I feel like that's kind of standard sometimes. Like we work ourselves to the grave just so we can have enough money to be broke. You know what I mean? But we're working hard, right? Like, and we're proud of that fact. And of course, like, you should be proud that you are working hard to provide for yourself or your family. But at the same time, like, it's still like emotionally damaging to think that you have 3 jobs and you still you're still barely making rent. Like, maybe you're still paying rent on the 15th and now you got to pay all these fees associated with it. Maybe you still got kids to feed. Like, ultimately what it feels like is you feel like a failure. And that's hard. Like, so when I think of like bootstraps and like this strong work ethic, now I have been able to be in a place to say I can find ways to make money, right? Now I need to find healthy ways to make money. Like, I don't want to sacrifice my mental or physical health. Stephanie talked about like lifting something that she had no business doing. And like, what's sad is like, as soon as she said that, it triggered me to like have all these different memories of me doing ratchet shit that I should not have been doing. And I knew in the moment that I shouldn't have been doing it, but I was doing it for the betterment of the team. I didn't go to sick call, right? Now I got all these health issues that the VA won't help me with because they said it's not service related, because I was told going to the doctor is a bad thing, right? Like, I had a traumatic brain injury before we were talking about traumatic brain injuries. I didn't know that was a thing. I got out of the military. I was like, oh, this is, come to find out, those concussions that I had all the time, those weren't a good thing, right? So it's like, really, I think in terms of like economics, right? Like, knowing the struggle and like slowing down and not rushing to take some shitty job because you're in a difficult situation. Like, you can find like healthy ways to make money. Emotionally wise, like is just as important. Like you're investing time, you're investing your energy, you're investing your emotion. So really um think have a different mindset, like have a growth mindset to say, hey, you do deserve better. It takes a lot of practice. I am getting into the zone of like mastering it and telling people to fuck off, like I'm not going to do that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about yourself later. But right now I don't have the emotional energy to do so. So I think those are the big takeaways for me.
Okay, Jennifer, your thoughts.
So going back to my experience and expertise in some of the education world, that same research that I was talking about that our organization has done provided that information that greater portions of undergraduate students of color, both veterans and non-veteran, had 5 or more risk factors that were associated with non-completion compared to their white peers. And some of those risk factors are things like we tend to be first generation students with a disability status. We may not have high school diplomas. We may be enrolled in school part-time because we are juggling jobs. We may have dependents, maybe my mom in this scenario, which, by the way, my mom did graduate college finally the year before I graduated with my bachelor's, so I was very proud of her. But going back to the risk factors, we tend to see that students of color, maybe single parents working full-time while enrolled, like I mentioned before, have a disability and are first generation students. And all of this impacts our ability to be successful in school, where our white peers generally don't have as many risk factors as students of color. So that alone is just, if we're talking about at an educational level, at an institution level, we're already starting well below our peers. And it's just that much harder and that much higher of a ladder for us to climb. We're not starting on the same ream. So trying to get to the same financial status is a bigger task and a bigger ask for people of color than those that are white.
Thank you for that. Stephanie, I actually want to pose another question for you. I think that it's also important that we mention personal growth, right? And how that development is extremely important. So Stephanie, this idea that a bunch of individual steps toward happiness, right, can erase years of trauma or self-doubt. What are your thoughts around that?
That is bullshit. And let me tell you why. That doubt is always going to be there because it's trauma, you know what I mean? And we're trying to work our way through it. And, Eric had said something where kind of touching back again, what I said, like, yeah, I work 3 jobs, you know what I mean? I put myself through hell. And you know what happened? I got evicted and my car got repoed. And actually my dog passed away. It was like an old country song. All that stuff happened. And I was out on my butt. And I said to myself, I was like, all that for what? I did all that for what? And now here I am still out on my ass because I wanted to live up to this dream of being somebody and being in this really good part of town because this is where all the cool people live and I can walk to the grocery store. And it was something that I strived to be, and it ended up biting me in my butt later on. And so that still sticks with me. And I mean, you won't forget it, one, because it's going to be on your credit, but 2, knowing that had happened and it could possibly happen again, I feel like I'm still in that spot where I don't ever want to be back in that again. But I also realized that what I was doing again wasn't healthy, and I could have been doing something that was more sustainable. And it was really also looking for folks who would give me a chance in a career to be successful. too, and but yeah, lessons were definitely learned, but I mean, they still stick with you no matter what. And sometimes it could even just further damage you later, because you don't want the past to come bite you back in the butt. It's like you're constantly running away from that, trying to reach a higher you. So you don't have to ever go through that again.
Absolutely. So we're all military veterans, right? And transition can be a very, very hard thing. And I know Eric spoke to, his time in service and how long he's been separated from service. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is that transition isn't just a year-long thing, right? Or a 2-year-long thing. Like, this is a constant thing that happens. And, and I don't want to speak for you, Eric, but there may be instances where you are still transitioning. I remember when I got out of the military in 2013, and it's, small stuff. Although, I dealt with larger, more traumatic events as well, but it was just like, who am I, right? Outside of this uniform, right? Like, what happens if I don't wake up too early, or if I put my hands in my pocket, or, you know what I mean? Just like those kind of, smaller things that you're trying to figure out about yourself. And then, of course, you add all of these other kind of layers to it, right? If you're a parent, right? Or if you, don't really have a safe and stable home to go back to, right? So when we talk about transition, what resources were available for you during your transition? Whether someone referred you there, whether you had to kind of do the digging on your own, that kind of helped you propel to the level of success in where you are. So we'll start with Eric. He's ready to go. But yeah, so what resources were available for you?
So this is going to sound completely insane. I got out in 2005, so I'm not even sure if transition was a phrase that we used when we got out of the military. Like, there was so much going on at that time, right? Like, we're fighting 2 wars. My unit was still deployed, like, after I had to come back because I got medevaced. I got a medical discharge, so there was not, like, that wasn't my choice. So literally, from the time that I got my orders, like, I was out within 2 weeks. And it was literally, you go around campus and you get your little paper sign and hope that you make it through CIF within 5 times. And that was it, right? Like, I honestly believe, like, I'm not being facetious when I say I don't think transition was a word that we used. So there was no transition. There was no resources. I don't even think I knew I was a veteran. Like, because I damn sure, like, didn't use that term. I don't think I had contact with any veteran service agency for at least 5 years after I got out. Yeah, that's about right. 5 or 6 years after I got out of the military. So I did go, like, I went to college, so I went to some of those predatory schools initially, right? And this was back when it was just Montgomery GI Bill. They don't have institutions that serve veterans. They just want the money, right? Eventually I went to, like, a local community college. So there was a little bit of talk there, but again, like, there wasn't much. So to be honest, like, you want a transition story from me, it wasn't there. Like, it was much longer, and getting connected and feeling safe and having a supportive community to get me through my transition process. I don't really think I started my transition until much later. And then now, like, I'm in the later phases of transition. Like, life is a transition in itself, right? So identify smaller things within that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there's some comments coming into the chat that were saying, transitional resources, weren't a thing, back then. And that's important to note. Everybody's kind of, come out of the military at different times. And so it was definitely a term as I transitioned, but to know that was much harder, to do. And so I want to pose that question to our viewers here in Zoom. What kind of resources, or was transition a term when you exited, if you are a veteran? So I'll be looking for those responses in the chat. But Stephanie and Jennifer, what did that look like? What resources were available for you as you exited service, right? Discharged, or, just separated from service?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever I was also medically discharged, I was legit just given a pamphlet, and that was it. There was no resources as maybe how to put together a resume, how to translate your military skills into civilian skills so you can try to get a job later. There was no, let's try to get you with a local resource where your hometown was. There was none of that. It was just pretty much, all right, bye, good luck. And that was that. And yeah, and that was in 07. I got out in 07. So, but yeah, we didn't have anything available.
I, like you, Melissa, got out in 2013. I guess it was November 2013. I went through TAPS. I see a couple people in the chat also did, but I found that to not be very helpful. You could choose a track. You could either choose the educational track or the career path, where you were supposed to get some training through the Department of Labor. I chose that because the education track was just teaching you how to fill out FAFSA. And I was like, I was admin, so I can figure out how to fill out FAFSA. I got this. I don't need that. We'll do the Department of Labor stuff. And we got this big book, and some of the activities were interesting and learned a little bit, but I didn't actually feel like it prepared me to leave after 11 years of service. You know, these 4 days or whatever I spent was not going to be able to help me walk out. The only thing that I found really helpful from the TAP session was meeting DAV. I submitted everything to DAV in that time period that I was over there. I think I did it at Miramar. And that was the one thing that I was super grateful for, and I impress upon anybody else that's getting out to do. When I did get out and start going to school, I tried to reach out to veteran service organizations. I tried VFW, but I didn't feel like it worked for me, not in Eugene, Oregon, where not many people look like me. And especially many aren't women. And so when I found Team Red, White, and Blue, what I appreciated was that it was an organization that did focus on veterans, but also tried to integrate veterans in the community. And this is what I wanted. I didn't want to be a part of a community of veterans that only focused on our time in the military. It was really important for me to find a group that was ready to move forward and put the military behind, because my experience was just, I was ready to move on from it.
Okay, thank you. And so I also want to just, again, thank our viewers that are here with us. If you represent any organizations or have access to any resources that could be helpful to veterans, I encourage you to just go ahead and drop a website or a name in the chat, something that we can share amongst each other. I think that you know, as the panelists spoke to, things have definitely changed, right? From the time that Eric got out, not to kind of put you on blast, you know, to the time that, you know, Jennifer and I exited our service, lots has happened, right? There's been a little bit more emphasis, not too much, but a little bit more emphasis about life after the military, right? Like what to do, where to go. And that can also have a significant impact on, you know, what happens, right? A lot of times veterans are left without, you know, access to VA benefits, right, to employment, to stable housing. Mental health, right, is a huge factor in kind of the success of just individuals as a whole. So thank you for that. And I see some resources starting to pop up in the chat now. So let me pose this question as we kind of wind down this conversation. And I'm going to ask for your true and honest you know, responses, not that you haven't given them to me, but I really want to know from you, from each of you. Now that I see Eric is getting ready, right? So now that we've kind of admitted that the bootstrap myth, right, isn't true, what do we do about it? Do we work to change the narrative around it? Do we, you know, do we just acknowledge that it exists? What do we do about it? Now that we've had our own personal experiences, we've had an opportunity to talk through it, what's next?
I'd say call it out, right? Like call it out for what it really is. I mean, because there are people that are like not trying to be harmful, right? And the phrase itself doesn't sound harmful. So who are they to not use those terms like suck it up or pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever other coded language there is out there. Like really take the time to like understanding it, like there is labor involved with this and that labor should not be on you. But sometimes things just are the way that they are. And I think it's really important that like we number one honor the fact that and be honest with ourselves whether or not we're in a good place for us to have that conversation. And is it more damaging for you to say nothing, or is it more damaging for you to have to explain it to a person? You have the right to make that decision because you know yourself better than anyone else. But really, I think the big thing is like really like trying to reach one or two people at a time and just say, hey, like here's why this is damaging. Because the reality is I think there's enough conversation in the world to know like it's common knowledge that not everybody has the same upbringing. Not everybody has the same socioeconomic status. That's undebatable. So you figure out now you need to figure out who you're talking to. Don't go out talking to the crazies, okay? Because you're just gonna waste your time, right? Like talk to the people who are like on the fence or clearly are either naive or neglectful and they just don't understand versus talking to someone who's abusive. Like don't do that. Don't put yourself in a situation. I think you matter a lot more than that. And so just find people that you find value in, people that you like are willing to talk to and you know they haven't said some problematic shit that made you uncomfortable. Those are the ones that you talk to, give them the information that they need, and then have them start doing some of the work for you. Because a lot of those people come from privileged backgrounds. And so what's really powerful is people who come from privilege and speak about privilege, because now they're talking on a peer-to-peer relationship and they're more relatable. So that's my technique. But first and foremost, check on yourself first and make sure you're in a place to do that.
Great. Stephanie.
Yeah, I mimic like everything that Eric was just saying. I was like, no, spot on the nose. It you know, in some cases too, it does take a lot of confidence to even speak on that too, depending on who you're talking to when you want to confront that type of mentality, like for example like in the workplace. And how can you do that without trying to also incriminate yourself or seem like you are not trying to work hard as well? And so it's tough for at times, but then again, you have to realize where you can actually speak your truth and feel that you're going to be heard. So there's some questions that you would have to answer within yourself too. But, you know, for me, I immediately think about, you know, maybe my nieces, you know, where my brother, he was a Marine and his wife just got out of the Army. So they kind of know, you know, a little bit of that mentality as well. But it's also letting them know that you don't have to go that route to be here, you know. So kind of teaching them, because they're close to me, of what other things are out there that maybe they want to be interested in. Like, you want to be a dancer? Okay, let's go see if you do good in dance class and let's see what we can do. You want to be a scientist and you don't want to go this way? Cool, let's go see what you can do. But it's really uplifting those around you and letting them know that you can actually do this and you don't have to follow that same path that you're really familiar with.
I absolutely agree with what both of you have said. And so I'll try to offer something different or in addition to what you've shared, is that I think what we can do is try to check ourselves too in our conversations that we're having with friends. The one thing that I've realized is I have to acknowledge that I also wouldn't be here if I didn't have the GI Bill and if I didn't have other VA resources like VRNE to get me through law school. Absolutely realize that not everyone has that, and not everyone is going to have the time to be able to use it like I did, where I just buried myself. And so when you're encouraging your friends to do things that you've done because you know how to do it and you want to walk them through it, recognize that they may not be where you're at. And so check yourself, because you may be impressing upon them this mentality that they too can make it to where you're at, but they may not want to. And having served, provided resources to us that some of our peers and friends back home don't have. And it doesn't mean that we need to push them, as Stephanie said, to the military, because there are other ways that they can give back to the community and serve without having to put on a uniform. And so I think I would offer that while we're trying to figure out whether or not we should check someone else for saying some of these things to us, or in front of us, what are we saying to our own friends and community and family members that may be suggesting that we're telling them that they need to work harder, or that they can get somewhere further by doing X, Y, and Z. So listen. I think we can all do a better job listening.
Well, thank you so very much. This has been a great discussion. I think it has been informative for me as the moderator. You know, I'm here to kind of lead the conversation, and I've learned something from each of you this evening. So I do want to just say thank you for sharing your personal stories. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. There are a ton of resources in the chat. So I encourage you all to just take a look, you know, utilize what works for you, what doesn't. Yeah, just so much praise in the chat about the discussion. What I want to remind everybody is that this particular panel discussion is part of a series of discussions hosted by Project Thrive, which is Minority Vets Economic Empowerment Program, working to advance the career and economic interest of minority vets. So there will be more. There will be more opportunities to chime in, to participate in these panel discussions. So again, I just appreciate everybody spending their hour and a half with us just about. How might our viewers contact you? Eric, Stephanie, Jennifer, are there any ways that you might want to drop in the chat if someone has any follow-up questions? I'll go ahead and give you guys an opportunity to do that. But yeah, this was just, like I said, it was just such a warm and inviting conversation, and something I think that we needed to have. Yep, we have some more thank yous. Absolutely. Continue to follow Minority Vet social media. Go ahead and hop over to our website to learn more about Project Thrive. Yeah, I just appreciate everybody's participation. It was so much fun. And yeah, any last thoughts or questions that the panel has for our viewers, or anything that you wanted to just make sure you got across during this discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you a little quick story, and maybe some of you have heard about this before, but sure. When I talk about like community and finding people that are empowering to you the way they are empowering, that you're empowering to them as they are empowering to you, I want you to know that how believable it is. I met Lindsay just a few years ago. She pulled me to the side and she's like, hey, we're going to do this MVA thing. We want you to be a part of it. Right. And like you instantly fall in love with the idea when she explained it to you. We all know, like, we are suckers for that woman. Okay. But the amount of work and like being able to conceptualize, like, this is the point that we are at. Not a lot of time has passed between now and then, and we're talking about programming, doing national things like Project Thrive. Like that wasn't even a thought, right? But like this is an organization that has literally put ideas out there and said, hey, here's an idea, let's run with it, and everyone's behind it, and they're volunteers, they're not employees, and they're just busting their ass because they believe in the mission. This was just an idea, like purely an idea. And then you got a few crazy, hard driven people who came up through that bootstrap mentality and used it to their advantage to build a system of support and community. I want you to know, like, that this was truly started on the smallest level, and it was built as retribution, as retaliation, as whatever you want it to be, from trauma. And each and every one of you are kicking ass in your own way. I don't know all of you. I just know what you stand for and why you're here. And I'm telling you that this is amazing.
Well, you know, Eric, you've got a little shout out in the chat from Lindsay Church herself. And she says, for the record, you are the heart and the soul of this org in our humble beginnings. So that is to you.
It's an honor.
Stephanie, Jennifer, any final thoughts as we wrap up this discussion?
I just want to say thank you, Melissa. You've been a phenomenal moderator. I haven't met you, so it was great. And thank you. I really appreciated being invited to this. And I want to say thank you to everyone for all these resources, because I'm trying to copy them down for myself and to share with anyone else I come in contact with. So thanks.
Yes, same. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Feel definitely a little honored to be between both Eric and Jennifer. At least on my screen, I'm between both of them. So thank you for that. Melissa, you've been great. Awesome moderating. And again, thank you all for also kind of tuning in, watching, and dropping your information in the chat and resources. That's really helpful for, I think, everybody that'll be here. So thank you.
And again, for those interested in volunteering or learning more about MVA, minorityvets.org is our website. We are extremely active on all our social media platforms. So follow us, share, stay tuned for what we have. And again, thank you so much for participating in this conversations around the myth of the bootstrap mentality. And I hope you all have a wonderful and safe evening.